Let's get started. Welcome to this TLC presentation. My name is Matt Phillips, and I am a Student Affairs Program Manager here at UAGC. I'm just the session host. I'm going to introduce our presenter. The title of this presentation is Helping Students from Historically Marginalized and Underserved Communities Achieve Success and Improved Economic Status Through Access to Higher Education. Really exciting topic from Diana. By joining us today, you acknowledge that this session is being recorded and will be shared with TLC-related materials. Microphones will be muted for this presentation, but we encourage you to post questions and comments in the chat. I will try to monitor the chat as best I can. Also, we have enabled live transcription. If you'd like to use it, click the Show Captions button at the bottom of your Zoom window. Now, I am pleased to introduce you to my esteemed and passionate colleague, Diana Boggan. I'm going to fade into the background. Hi, Diana.
Thank you, Matt, for such an energetic welcome. I appreciate you. So I am Diana Boggan. I am a faculty development and coaching specialist in the lovely Faculty Affairs Department here at UAGC. I have worked with this institution for just over 7 years. I have an MS in Educational Technology and Instruction, plus a BS in Math. I am also a first-generation graduate. I'm Filipino, Hispanic, white. I was adopted by missionaries from the Midwest when I was a baby, and I was born and raised right here in San Diego in a little border town called San Ysidro, which has a population of about 30,000, 90% Hispanic, and about half of the population were born outside of the US. For context, just under 27% of the population in California are born outside of California, outside of the US. So those are my fun stats. I'm also a domestic abuse survivor. I have experienced housing and food insecurity. I've lived in my car. I've been a single mother. I've been on Cash Aid and CalFresh, which is formerly food stamps, more than once as an adult. I've had long periods of time without medical insurance or proper medical care. I was 21 the first time I had medical insurance through the state of California when I was pregnant with my first child. I was a high school dropout, and it took me over 7 years to get my bachelor's degree due to life events that slowed down my progress. So those were a lot of odd details, but just hang in there because I want to dig in a little bit more to some more demographics. So here are some comparisons of the median income and the percentage of people living below poverty level as calculated by the US Census Bureau. So we're looking at the United States overall is the purple color there. Then the golden shade for sunny California, blue is for San Diego, and red is that suburb that I grew up in. So you may notice it's probably fairly intuitive as the median income decreases, the percentage of the population in poverty increases. So let's look at another set of numbers. I didn't include the overall US statistics here just for the sake of space, but here are results for the highest level of education, which are probably also fairly intuitive with what we know to be true about how higher education impacts income. So if you remember from our previous slide, San Diego and California, they had higher median incomes and lower rates of poverty. Here we also see that San Diego and California have higher rates of people who earned a 4-year degree or higher. So where I grew up, 46% of the population stopped at high school. Only 2% made it to getting a graduate degree, compared to 17% of San Diego and 14% of California. All right, so where am I going with all of this? Let's go ahead and we're going to move on. My slides are being a little slow. So we're going to define historically marginalized and underserved communities. So historically marginalized and underserved communities refer to groups of people who have been systematically disadvantaged, oppressed, or excluded from various aspects of society based on characteristics such as race, ethnicity, social economic status, gender, sexual orientation, disability, and other factors. These communities have typically experienced limited access to resources, opportunities, and basic rights, which has resulted in a cycle of disadvantage passed down through generations. All right, examples of these communities: racial and ethnic minorities, so people who belong to groups that have faced discrimination or prejudice based on their race or ethnicity, includes, but not limited to, Black, Indigenous, Hispanic, Asian, and other communities. Low income or economically disadvantaged groups, individuals and families who experience poverty or limited economic resources, often leading to challenges in accessing education, healthcare, housing. We mentioned before the LGBTQ community, people who identify as lesbian, gay, bisexual, face discrimination, and are marginalized based on their orientation. People with disabilities, people who have physical, cognitive, sensory impairments, all fall into these underserved communities. Of course, women and gender minorities. Women have faced gender-based discrimination, wage gaps, and limited opportunities for leadership in various spheres of society. Immigrants and refugee communities, Indigenous people, religious minorities, these are all examples of marginalized and underserved communities. So what are some characteristics of these populations? It's important to know those characteristics so that we can talk about how to help them be more successful, right? So these populations are more likely to experience food scarcity, housing insecurity, lack of health care, mental health issues such as anxiety and depression, chronic diseases such as high blood pressure, asthma, allergies, and diabetes, crime either as a victim or a perpetrator, higher rates of unemployment, and lower levels of education. So just focusing on education, I want to stop and ask you to consider what are some barriers that prevent people in underserved communities from obtaining a four-year degree. This is your opportunity. I like to stop and get some input from the audience to share your answers in the chat. So if anybody wants to just reflect on barriers that prevent people in underserved communities from going to a four-year college, even a two-year college. Yes, transportation can be an issue, lack of resources, cost of tuition, materials, money, hard to prioritize, hidden curriculum of education, income, location, childcare, life's unfair avalanche. That is a good one, Jackie, right? Stephanie, hard to prioritize oneself above others' needs. That is definitely, these populations are often juggling multiple priorities, right? It's hard to choose. All right, so let's move on to the next slide. Thank you for sharing those. So some barriers to education, and I think a lot of you hit on some of those. Gaps in social, cultural, and even technical competencies. So technical ability. If you can't afford a computer, how much experience do you have using one? It's going to be limited to what you can access. Maybe it's when you were in high school, a shared computer. So just even accessing the technology and being able to use it is a barrier. Many of you mentioned income. So being able to afford the tuition, even if you get a grant or you get loans, there's still books, there's still other costs, right? There's always hidden costs that come up. So if you are a first generation student, which many of those in underserved communities are, how much experience do they have communicating effectively in the higher education sphere, right? How often are they talking to faculty and staff about their needs as a student? They just may not have that experience to do that or know how to reach out for resources and support when they're struggling. It's just a lack of a cultural and social exposure to the world of higher education. And that's where that lack of social and cultural experiences. They don't have a mom or a dad or an uncle or an aunt who went to college and traverse the often complicated realm of financial aid and classrooms and classes and choosing your schedule and your major and all of those things. It's more complicated than just enrolling in college and saying, I want a degree. There's lots of things to navigate. And if you don't have any exposure to that, it presents a challenge. And of course, competing priorities. We talk about work-life, school balance. If you're already juggling one or two jobs and children, if you're a single mom or you're a stay-at-home mom and you don't have help with childcare, that makes it very difficult to be a student. And not impossible, just very difficult. So let's look at some facts about college students and graduates. So since 2000, there's a study that was just done in 2022. The share of Americans with a bachelor's degree has increased across all races and ethnicities. So more students, more of our population are getting degrees. It's increased across all ethnicities. Now, if you look, there's about 38% of adults now over the age of 25 who have bachelor's degree. And to look at these statistics, you can see it's increasing. The Black and Hispanic communities have almost doubled in percentage. So we've gone from 16.5% to 28%. Hispanics have gone from 10 to 20%. So we're seeing more diversity among all ethnicities, which is good, right? So there's definitely a desire for those people in those underserved communities to get an education. So now let's look at some data on adults who did not pursue a bachelor's degree. They're not enrolled in school. And what did they say was their reasons for not enrolling in a four-year college? So these are broken down by both men and women. And the number one reason is that they couldn't afford to go to a four-year college. They couldn't afford to get the degree. The next reason is they had to work to support their family. The third reason is they just didn't want to. Interestingly enough, 34% of those were men versus 25% women. They just did not have any desire to go to a four-year college, which is kind of sad. Some didn't need more education for the career they wanted, which I find also kind of sad because we know that if you have more higher education opens doors for jobs that typically have higher income. So they're saying that the job they have is enough income and they don't need more school. There's a percentage that didn't consider it, and while it's number 6 on the list, 13 and 14%, they didn't think that they could get into a 4-year college, so they didn't try. I find that one to be very sad, just because they just didn't think they could get in, so they're not going to try. So moving on to open access education. What does it mean to have open access education? When I use that phrase, I'm talking about, in this context, looking at how hard it is for a student to be accepted. So this data shows that institutions that are less selective have higher rates of students in poverty and are non-white students. So those are the students that fall into your historically marginalized and underserved communities, right? The study also found that across all types of institutions, these numbers have increased between this looked at between 1996 and 2016. They increased, but the increase was more significant in those less selective institutions. And those are your public 2-year community colleges, your private for-profit institutions, and then minimally selective 4-year institutions. Jackie, yes, I mean, I grew up in San Diego, and we have several colleges, community colleges, 4-year colleges, and I did not finish high school when I was supposed to. I was a little late. So the next set of data that I want to look at is shows the racial diversity among different types of institutions. So across all institutions, you can see the distribution there of white, Black, Hispanic, Asian, other, which is mixed races, or those not included. And it's comparing those again from 1996 to 2016, and then comparing it to public 4-year, private nonprofit 4 years, public 2 years, and private for-profit. And again, you're seeing more racial diversity in 2016 in those 2-year colleges and 4-year private for-profit colleges, and those will be falling into those less selective. It's easier to get into those institutions, right? They don't have the admission process is less selective. So beyond an institution being selective, the data suggests that as the selection process gets more difficult, more selective, requires higher achievement, people from marginalized and underserved communities have less representation at those institutions. So beyond an institution being selective in their admission process and choosing highest achievers, another factor that an institution has to consider are the challenges inherent with supporting students from these populations. So we talked about barriers to education earlier. How to overcome those barriers is the puzzle that we need to solve, right? Just getting a student enrolled can be a huge barrier to overcome. But additionally, institutions have to take into consideration how to address knowledge and skill gaps in communication, language, writing skills. Navigating the culture of higher education may just be a foreign concept to some of these students, and institutions will need to find ways to support students through these challenges. We've talked about competing priorities, working adults, caring for children, juggling responsibilities. How do you support students with competing priorities? Resource scarcity, time and money. How do you help students who are struggling financially? Accessibility and wellness. What unique challenges are there in supporting students who are more likely to have disabilities, physical and mental health concerns? Yes, Jackie, open access attitude. You belong here. Making students feel that they belong and are welcomed is a good first step. So these are some challenges that institutions must take into consideration as they move towards open access. So what is the solution? That's kind of a loaded question, right? There isn't one simple answer, but I'd like to hear what you think could be solutions, or at least put us in the right direction. So if you want to put in the chat, share your thoughts, and then I will share my thoughts. How do you think that higher education institutions can help support students from underserved communities be more successful beyond as they consider or introduce open access? Kathy, that's a good idea. Getting access to college courses in their junior and senior year. Oh, that's interesting. A preparedness gap. Student mentoring is we have our CHAMPS program, and that's definitely a way to help empower students and peers. More streamlined transition from graduating high school to college. I definitely agree. My son struggled because he was in a project-based high school, and then he went to college and they did not do project-based learning. And so he was very much not prepared for that different type of learning. All right, so it could be my exposure of working here at UAGC, but I believe that the solution starts with a culture of care. So showing empathy for our students, our staff, and our faculty. You have to support, I firmly believe that we have to support our faculty and our staff as those who are frontliners with working with students. Faculty need to feel like they belong in their institution so that they can help students feel that they belong too. Building trust so that we can become someone that our students or faculty will come to when they are in need. This comes up a lot when we think about academic integrity. How can we shift our mindset so that we are assuming the best of our students and not jump to conclusions? Are we approaching discrepancies like high similarity scores, for example, from a supportive and teaching perspective, or are we being accusatory? How are we building trust? Fostering authentic relationships. Are you showing students that you are more like them than they realize, maybe more than you realize? Are you willing to share personal experiences to bridge relational gaps between students and faculty? Are you approachable? Are you showing that you care? Are you offering flexibility? I've heard this more than once from multiple sources, and I absolutely believe it to be true. Flexibility does not hinder rigor. It allows rigorous work to be accomplished. Is it more important to allow students to learn and achieve learning outcomes, or to make sure that they've met deadlines, rigorous, rigid deadlines? Beyond being flexible and waiting for students to come to you, can we be proactive? Can we reach out to struggling students before they reach out to us? Throw them a life raft before they give up and drown. Can you step in sooner so your chance of helping them is higher? And my last thing in my short culture of care kind of summary is to remember your why. It's easy to get empathy burnout, caregiver fatigue. You can lose your why you became an educator or entered the education field when you're, in the trenches every day for long periods of time. So I would like us to all pause here for a couple minutes And I am going to play a video that will hopefully remind us all of our why. And I should have remembered to include sound. We'll see.
Chapter 2. Open up your books. Hey, John. I really think you're going to enjoy this book. I think you will. All right, John. What's going on? Just listen.
Cilluffo, Chapter 1.
Hello?
Hey, it's, John.
Sorry to call you so late, miss.
What's going on?
Can I ask a question about tonight's homework?
Of course.
Hi. So with that, I think we have we're just at time. I talked too much. So if you have any questions,
We still have 3 minutes.
We have 3 minutes. If anybody wants to share their why, I love hearing why people have gotten to education. And if anyone is brave and wants to come on camera and share for 2 minutes, feel free.
Diana, I love that you brought this up and are presenting, because it just reminds me, for part of my why is collaboration across teams and departments and getting to connect with other people. And I think this presentation brought, when I look at the chat and the people in here, we're across so many departments here at UAGC, and then some external folks are joining us. But I think bringing everyone together for that unified support of students is one of my whys, and you've articulated that so well here. So thank you.
Thank you, Allison. Thank you for that feedback. That's great. Kathy, I like that. It's just not something that's no one can take that away. That's great. Awesome. Yeah, I really like that video. It really, I tell you, it gives me the goosebumps every time. It's goosebump worthy. Sherry sees her role as investing in both students and the world to make it a better place. Teach communication and conflict classes, so that's students can see the why. Yes. Awesome. Thank you, Dr. Brosa. You are too nice. All right, Matt, I will hand it over to you.
Thanks, Diana. Thanks so much for an intriguing, empowering session. Thanks to the audience and participants for robust participation in the chat, everybody's thoughts. Please use the survey that I just linked in the chat to nominate this TLC presentation for a conference award and share your feedback on your conference experience. There are multiple awards, so make sure you go in there and suggest this presentation. Diana, thank you for this really insightful presentation. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, Matt. Thanks for hosting.